Brian, can you hear me? Hello?
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
I am on my way. I just got hung up in an accident. Well, not me personally in an accident. I got hung up by track from there,
Okay,
probably about 5 minutes late.
okay, that's fine. Thank you, Brian.
Like to call this meeting to order, a special meeting of the Village Board on Monday, September 26th at 6 PM in the Germantown Village Hall Boardroom and also can be accessed via WebEx. This meeting has been given public notice in accordance with sections 19.83 and 19.84 of the Wisconsin statutes in such form that will apprise the general public and news media of subject matter that is intended for consideration and action. Roll call shows all village board members present except for trustee Baum, who I understand is in transit. Next item on the agenda after roll call is unfinished business. One item listed. Item A, ordinance number 16-2022, ordinance to adopt the Village of Germantown 2050 Comprehensive Plan. Is there any background or information you want to present? Director Retzloff.
President, could we have a point of order, please?
Point of order would be Jeff, but what would you like?
I wanted to request, since we have a full house here, that citizen comments be read.
No, it's not on tonight's agenda. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to work with and to talk about the adoption of the 2050 plan. And it is a special meeting of the village board so that in that time, we have chosen not to have public comment. And within a special meeting, that is our right. Director Retzloff.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to kick things off, but first I'd like to explain the handouts that were available to you in your mailboxes and or on the dais this evening. First, a copy of the ordinance 16-2022, copies of the 2050 plan, future land use plan map, also known as the neighborhood district and corridor map, and tables that are included in the 2050 plan. The overall revision list that the Plan Commission considered as part of making their recommendation to adopt the 2050 plan. That revision list includes 4 map exhibits. And finally, fourth document, we did receive, subsequent to the public hearing and most recently, a request from the Washington County Community Development Department with some suggested revisions, some minor revisions, if you will, to certain sections in the housing section to further refine or define and clarify their next generation housing item. And those I presented to you and you can do with as you see fit, along with the Plan Commission recommendation and others that you've received in other forms. So with that, the 2050 plan, 3 years in the making. I guess we never envisioned it would take quite this long. You may recall, some of you, that we kicked off the 2050 plan back in July of 2019 with a public meeting over at the library. It was intended to have an 18-month timetable, preparing the plan along with staff. Grafe, we hired Grafe as our planning consultant. And the intention was to adopt a smart growth compliant plan, an update to the 2020 plan, based on with a process that was based on a community engagement plan that was adopted previously by the board in June. We navigated some challenges, principally the COVID situation. We lost approximately 18 months of time. We had to pivot and revised our community engagement options to include virtual versus in-person contact for a temporary period of time. But also, and maybe more importantly, we added a social pinpoint community engagement website to the process that turned out to be a good component, a good information and opinion gathering tool for us through the process. Ultimately, we had over 40 meetings, 7 open houses, public meetings and or hearings, 19 Plan Commission meetings that had the 2050 plan as the primary topic, 15 Plan Commission meetings where it was an agenda item, and there was also 5 pop-up events that were held throughout the process. Other opportunities included our 2019 community survey, And also, as I mentioned, our social pinpoint website, germantown2050.com, that had two components. As shown on the screen on the left, we had an interactive mapping component, and on the right, a visual preference survey. Again, both tools we used to gather quite a bit of information that was ultimately collected, downloaded, and included in the packet of information that we sent the Plan Commission and the board over and over and over again, which is why every time the packet was 800 to 1,000 pages, it had, we had documented the public comments that we had received in large measure, included all of that in the packets at every step in the way. A couple of slides I want to dedicate to our the smart growth statute that has shaped our proposed plan. Back in 1999, the state legislature adopted the smart growth legislation along with Wisconsin Statute 66.1001 that lays the basis for comprehensive planning in the state of Wisconsin. It requires all municipalities that were regulating land use to adopt a comprehensive plan beginning January 1 of 2010. Therein lies sort of the focal point created by the statute for comprehensive plans, that being land use. Since that time, there have been many legislative attempts to water down and in some cases even eliminate the comprehensive plan requirements. Ultimately, 80% of all the municipalities in the state approximately adopted a comprehensive plan. Only 28% of those have updated their original plan, and those that did, 66%, have taken approximately 18 and a half years to do so, including the village of Germantown. One of the items that had been watered down, if you will, in the smart growth legislation was the consistency requirement. Essentially, communities that were going to make decisions that involved implementation or administration of their land division and platting ordinances, their zoning ordinances, tax incremental financing district decisions, boundary agreements, and farmland preservation ordinances, they have to make those decisions consistent with their comprehensive plan. And that, again, therein lies the notion that the comprehensive plan, for all intents and purposes, is focused around the future land use plan element and the decisions that are made surrounding it. It is the most critical element in the plan. It was in our 2020 plan, and it is again in our 2050 plan. On the screen is a copy of the 2020 plan. Included a map. It was a parcel-based plan where every parcel of land had a color, and each color coincided with a desirable land use that was either existing at the time or it was intended to be eligible for that type of development. With the 2050 plan, we've gone from a parcel-based to a place-based future land use plan map, including, as you can see on the screen on the right, the map for the village divides the village into 32 contiguous areas, each showing similar characteristics in terms of geography, existing development patterns, and the like. And along with the map that shows those 32 neighborhoods, districts, or corridors, there are land use tables that show the preferred land use for that particular neighborhood, district, or corridor. Each of the 32 NDCs has a profile included in the plan. On one half, there is a description of the characteristics of the area, a map, a windowing in of the map area, the boundary, and then also a description of the preferred land uses for the area with a graphic that shows in green what's desirable, in yellow what's allowable, and in white what's undesirable. And it's basically this description and layout that drives what land uses can be in a particular neighborhood or district or corridor. Again, it's a place-based, an area-based, a neighborhood district corridor-based land use plan, map, and guide, and not just a parcel-based plan as the 2020 plan was. A couple more graphics. In the plan, you'll find, apart from the individual profiles for each of the NDCs, There are summation tables for the plan map and for the future preferred land use tables as well. Back on August 22nd, the Plan Commission was tasked with considering all of the public input, the draft that had been prepared by staff, the original draft, and the revision list that had been put together by staff based on public input that had been received. And ultimately, the revision list included in the packet of materials were broken down into 78 minor revisions that were suggested at various points in the process by the public, by staff, by Plan Commission, and village board members alike. Of those 78 minor revisions, 75 were ultimately adopted. There were 29 major revisions, including 4 boundary adjustments that are shown in the map exhibits, and 18 of those 29 major revisions were ultimately adopted by the Plan Commission. And I'm going to go over the map exhibits right now because, frankly, the map exhibits pertain to 2 areas in the village that have received a significant amount of feedback in the last few weeks, going back to and beyond our last meeting last Monday, but beyond that as well. And over the course of this last week, as early as today, we received feedback concerning some of the boundary adjustment areas. On this first exhibit, it involves a revision that the Plan Commission made to the Holy Hill Gateway area. On the left is the what was the staff recommended plan, and on the right is what the Plan Commission ultimately recommended. In the area that's circled is approximately 80 acres. Half of that area was reclassified and moved from the Isabel Farms neighborhood into the Holy Hill Gateway district. The second map adjustment also involves the Holy Hill district. An area west of the Woodside neighborhood is shown on the left. Ultimately, the staff recommendation was to include that in the Holy Hill Gateway district. The Plan Commission opted to remove a portion of that area and put it into the Woodside neighborhood to the east. The third map exhibit and boundary adjustment that was made pertains to an area east of the Woodside neighborhood, essentially east of Goldendale Road. The original staff recommendation was to include that area in the Holy Hill Gateway district, and the Plan Commission recommendation was to take it out. We've pulled out the graphic and we've highlighted with the white and the red stripe boxes those 3 areas that were in question. The 2 on the top are areas that were removed from the Holy Hill Gateway district. One was put into the Woodside neighborhood, the other was put into the Rural Preservation District. And then the third area adjacent to Isabel Farms, that was an area, again, that was removed from Isabel Farms and put into the Holy Hill Gateway district as part of the Plan Commission recommendation. I've got a couple more graphics here that show that area. If we need to look closer at this, we can as we get into the discussion. Also, in the plan, there is a concept plan that was prepared by the consultant for the Holy Hill Gateway area and the Freistadt district, and I've circled those areas that are in the concept plan as it currently stands in the recommended plan from the Plan Commission. Finally, the 4th map amendment pertains to an area down in the southwest part of the village along at the Lennon Road, County Line Road intersection. This area, originally in the staff recommended plan, was included in the Willow Creek Business Park District, and the Plan Commission ultimately recommended to take out the area as highlighted and create a new neighborhood that we've called the Lannon Gateway neighborhood. And I've got a box that shows that area too, and also an aerial photograph that shows that particular area. If need be, we can look at that as well. Before we get into discussion, I just want to take a quick minute and say a couple of thank yous. I want to express my gratitude to the residents and the property owners and the business owners who participated in our process, those who attended one or more of our workshops, our Plan Commission meetings, participated in the online community engagement activities. I want to particularly express my thanks to those who provided constructive criticisms and review comments. We had one individual, frankly, that provided over 125 written comments that ultimately led to a number of revisions that were in the revision list and adopted by the Plan Commission. I appreciate that kind of effort. And finally, I'd like to thank the GRAFE team led by Craig Hebner for their work throughout the process. And finally, I need to thank the community development staff, Lori Johnson and Emily Zant. Without those two, their hard work, their patience, and their guidance, we wouldn't be where we are today. So with that, I will open it up for discussion and questions.
Trustee Jan Miller.
I'd like to thank the Plan Commission and staff for providing all of this. The community development staff for providing all these wonderful charts. Very helpful. So we did get a lot of comments in the last couple days regarding the 4 areas that you identified, Jeff. So I was wondering if it would be okay with you if we could start from that number 1 in the Isabel Farms. Yes. So the comments that I received today were from the residents. The residents showed up at many of the workshops. They used the pinpoint tool that you had online, which was very effective. And they have requested to bring that, what shall I call it, strip of land that was taken away from the Isabel Farms neighborhood and put into the Holy Hill area. And I would agree with them. So one of the big points in this is that many of the owners in the Isabel Farms did research and wanted to be in an area where they would be in a rural area, which is 5 acres. And they achieved that, and everything that they looked at that was available was absolutely 5 acres. So now we have a development of, I'm going to say approximately 22 homes. Would that be approximately right, Jeff? I think so, in the neighborhood. In Isabel
I don't know
Farms.
the number of lots off the top of my hand. I don't think it's quite 22, but it
is
22? Okay.
22, confirming.
All right.
Thank you. And they reached out to us and said, we would like that land back. They don't want to look through their backyards and look at strip malls or multifamily. And do you have the back sheet of the change that happened that you were, that the Plan Commission is suggesting in that territory? Neighborhood?
Well, it's a boundary adjustment, so it simply puts that area back into the Holy Hill Gateway District.
So that means that it's all industrial?
No. No, the intention is that it would be developed with mixed use of commercial and residential with a higher intensity near the intersection and along Holy Hill Road that would become less intense as it moved from north to south, along with the creation of a buffer around the perimeter along the south and the east side of that part of the Holy Hill Gateway District. In fact, you know, get to the concept plan. If you can see on here, one of the things that we built in was this need for and desire for a green space and landscape buffer area around the perimeter of the Holy Hill Gateway District. And it's shown here for the most part along the north, the east, and the south boundary lines or perimeter boundary of the district. And originally, that was intended to include that area that's shown on the north side of Holy Hill Road, east of Goldendale.
Right.
We left it in the graphic there. But ultimately, the Plan Commission added that area to the south of Holy Hill into the Holy Hill Gateway District, one half of that land area that had been requested by the property owner for inclusion in the Holy Hill Road District for mixed use, commercial and medium density residential.
The request, and I'm going to restate it, is that land south of Holy Hill that was in Isabel Farms return to Isabel Farms, because
Make that a motion.
I will make a motion that the Isabel Farm, that the quadrant that used to be Isabel Farms that was brought into the Holy Hill Gateway District be put back into the Isabel Farm neighborhood. Thank you.
So just,
Before we start motions, a motion needs to be made to accept the ordinance first, and then you can make revisions to that.
I'll make the motion to accept the 2050 plan as presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion? Trustee Chandmiller.
I'll make your motion.
I'll make your motion.
I would like to make a motion to amend that the quadrant that was in Isabel Farms, that was moved to the Holy Hill Gateway District, be put back into the Isabel Farms neighborhood.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Motion to amend, made and seconded. Discussion.
might I just make a suggestion? So when you're looking at comprehensive plans, the statute contemplates, and certainly there's some legal opinions from the league, among other places, that agree that you really have three options as the village board as you're looking to adopt the plan. You can adopt the plan as it's been recommended, you can reject the plan as it's been recommended, or you can refer it back to the plan commission if you're making kind of substantial changes that kind of minor technical changes. Those types of things are things that this body has the ability to do. But if you're making a substantive change, that really needs to be referred back to the plan commission. And so I think probably the motion that needs to be made is to refer that request back to the plan commission. Again, assuming that you believe that to be a substantial change. Ultimately, the statute doesn't really define that for us. And so it's up to you, although I will just posit that in my mind, taking an area and changing the neighborhood that it's in is a substantial change in my mind, but ultimately that's your decision to make.
So let me make sure I'm understanding this right. The bottom black circle on the TV right now, moving just that bottom black circle and reverting it back to what the 2050 plan previously said is a substantial change?
Correct. It's not whether it's a change from the existing plan, it's whether it is a change from the plan that has been recommended for approval by the plan commission.
But the planning commission initially recommended it to be this way, and we're just changing it back to the previous version.
Planning commission's final version has it in the way that it is shown.
But it's up to us if we want to send it back to planning commission or not, is what you're saying.
Ultimately, what the statute contemplates is that if you are making substantial changes, then that needs to be referred back to plan commission. If this body in its wisdom decides that that change is not a substantial change, have at it. I just don't know that I would agree with that determination.
I have a question before I recognize somebody else. It was always my understanding that the Plan Commission came forward with a recommendation of what they felt the 2050 plan would be, and this body made the ultimate decision or the end decision of what it was going to be going forward. So what you're saying is you're going to play a tennis game back and forth if there's any changes to what comes out of Plan Commission until the two come together? This body can't make any changes to this plan, to this 2050 plan without making it go back to the Plan Commission?
I would suggest that in my experience that ping pong doesn't typically happen. That the plan commission generally is wise enough to say, oh, well, if that's what the village board likes, they're the elected body, they're the ones that are responsible to the taxpayers by vote as opposed to just an appointment. And generally they follow that lead. Not always, but generally. We have had an instance where it did go kind of back and forth a couple times with, well, we're not going to go that far. How about this instead? Kind of an approach. And that does occasionally happen.
I don't need that as an answer. Trustee Hudson.
A substantial change or changes that are substantial in nature, please?
Definition.
Well, as I said, the statute doesn't really define it. There's no case law that defines it for us. Ultimately, I think that, as I say, is up to you folks to decide. In my mind, taking something from one neighborhood, one potential classified set of uses, and changing that to another one, in my mind, is a substantial change.
And is the reason for your word of caution legal liability at some point down the road?
Well, certainly the end results, if this body just said, we're just going to approve it, we're not going to send it back, that you could have a developer that says, you did not approve your plan correctly, and therefore you can't hold me to what you're telling me is otherwise, quote unquote, consistent with that plan. In other words, they have a clean slate that they can propose what they want to do, and it needs to be addressed on its merits, not with regard to the plan itself.
Thank you.
Trustee Pieper.
So since you couldn't find any case law on this, that means that there have been no disputes taken to court regarding this issue, correct?
There is none that I'm aware of, correct.
So it doesn't seem like a big problem in my mind, since there's never been any disputes officially taken to court and there's been absolutely no case law created.
Well, I would suggest that that's probably not the case, that generally as it relates to land use, when developers huff and puff and threaten, and we're going to take you to court, and then they file their lawsuit, generally there's some sort of resolution that's come, we might not give you everything you want, but we'll give you this. And that becomes the resolution.
There's been no case law created for this unique circumstance.
That I am aware of, correct.
Crystal clear.
Trustee Baum.
Okay, so I was part of the impetus to change this small piece of property from one zoning to the other. And it was based on a type of building that we were looking to have in this area. I see it as a very minor change. Within the purple area, we are allowed to have multifamily, correct? Director Etzloff?
Correct.
Okay. In the purple zone, we are allowed to have multifamily. It was a vision that I had and I presented at the last meeting that at the intersection of Goldendale and Holy Hill, we would have townhouses that lined Holy Hill Road and the intersection, which was multifamily. To allow that multifamily to be developed, it had to be into the purple zone. It had to be in that format. So at the last minute, we made that change. After talking to multiple residents this last week and this weekend, the residents of the area would prefer just to go back to the original plan as presented. I am seeing it as a very minor change from townhouses to single-family homes. That is the difference of the zoning that we were talking about at the last meeting. It's not as if we were trying to put industrial in the top half of that and single-family 5-acre homes on the bottom half of that. Can you go back to the other image? That image. North of that purple line, we were not trying to put industrial there and 5-acre lots south of the yellow line. We were talking about refinements of the property. A townhouse along Holy Hill versus transitioning to 1 to 3 acre lots, transitioning to 5-acre lots, transitioning to Isabel Farms. That is the level of discussion that we're having at the last Plan Commission meeting. I see this as a minor change to that discussion.
Further discussion? Trustee Chandmiller.
So are you agreeing with going back then?
Oh, I'm fine with going back.
Okay.
I have no problem with that. If
All right.
that's what the residents want, I'll shoot back to that. And when we get into the implementation planning that I've talked to all the residents about, that this is coming forward, we'll get into that. We will refine these plans for this area, 3 areas of the village. I got no problem with switching this back to the original layout. I'm okay
Single
with that.
family only?
Single family, sure.
It's what's acceptable under that zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Go
It
back,
is.
go back to the
It is.
previous plan we had. This was a last minute discussion.
Oh, yeah.
Change it back to what it was. If everybody's bothered by it, yeah, change it back. I have no problem with that.
Further discussion? Trustee Chandmiller, you still have the floor.
Thank you. Do we, let's just be really clear. Is this an amendment to what we're talking about? Could it just be as simple as that? And then all of these amendments, I mean, we're making a motion. Will there be other motions? Are each motion is considered an amendment to what was presented to us today? And
Yeah.
then we just keep adding it on to what we have in front of us. Are we all okay with that? Is that what the, no?
We could take each one on its own merit and decide if you consider it a minor or a major
Major.
change in regards to what's being recommended versus what's being asked to it change to. So this one, per the discussion that we've had so far, several of the board members have felt that this was not a major change. It was a minor change going back to the way it was first presented based off of the Plan Commission's last meeting when they brought this forward with a positive recommendation as a kind of a end of the discussion recommendation is what Trustee Baum has pretty much said.
Okay. Next.
Trustee Hudson.
So I hate to be a wet noodle here, but if we're going to go through this and we're going to make this change and that change, and then pass this, what I think our attorney has cautioned us against is a potential lawsuit coming at some point during the future from some developer. Brian, am I paraphrasing correctly, or am I butchering your thoughts?
No, I think that is a real possibility. Now, with that said, Jeff, go back to your, I think, first slide that you had where it talks about the history. I mean, there is 80% of communities that just never adopted a plan, even though they were supposed to have done so by 2010. There are a large number of them that have just never updated their plan. Now, I might suggest that a village like, oh, I don't know, Whitefish Bay or Shorewood or West Allis, may not update their plan or have the need to update their plan because they're built out and, what are they going to do? And so I think that there may be some of that. I also know for a fact that some of those 28%, that 28% contemplates people who have gone through the very process that we've done here. I know other communities that have said that each of their little individual updates that they do when somebody comes forward with a proposed development and they need to change the comprehensive plan to do that, that qualifies as an update to their plan. And so they don't feel they need to do the full-blown thing. So, I mean, the risk may be small, but it's also a risk that, on the worst possible development that you could envision coming forward in a neighborhood, that's likely going to be the one where we get sued as part of that.
So in a case such as this, what is the wise path forward to go through these changes? Is that here or is that at the planning commission level?
Well, I think preliminarily it's here. I mean, you have to have a change that even necessarily needs to be discussed. Now, there may not be support from everybody on the board for the proposed change that we're talking about here, even to begin with. That's question one, potentially. Question two is then whether or not it's a substantial change that requires it to be referred back to Plan Commission or not.
But we only need one of those. So we could go through 19 changes, but the 20th could be a substantial change.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, there's certainly the argument that could be made that if you make, you make 4 changes, and even if they're not substantial in impact, that you're okay, but you make 25 small changes that
That's
maybe
a
that's
substantial-
substantial
that's
too.
what I was referring
I mean, again, we don't know. There's no definition that, identifies that for us.
Thank you.
Trustee Pieper.
I'd like to go back to a point of order and just go take each of these issues one by one. I'd like us to start voting on these issues one by one. And at the end of all of the changes that we make, we can decide if it's major or not.
Right now, the one before us is this one as a part of a amendment to the motion to accept the 2050 plan as presented by or as recommended by the Plan Commission. So this is the first amendment to it. The amendment wasn't a blanket amendment for all of it. It was just for this one, correct, Trustee Miller?
Was it that it's a minor revision?
Right.
Now,
I want to make this as simple as possible. So if we can do the next 4 that have to do with this land. No, just leave it 1,
Is this a minor revision or not?
minor. This was, it says
Minor.
What's the motion on the floor?
Motion on,
to,
the motion is to
Says-
move the land back to the Isabel Farms neighborhood. The one that square that was moved as far as the Plan Commission, but changed it down to the Holy Hill Gateway District. The motion was to place it back to the Isabel Farms neighborhood.
correct. On the map, exhibit number 1, it says it's a major revision.
well,
Jeff,
it does say major again. That's not the
Not,
term.
but
that's-
it's minor.
Well,
It-
it is major substantial. Again, there's no clear.
And I presented that it's a minor revision from the discussion that we had.
Okay.
Acres.
So
Minor,
Do we have to clarify that?
every time.
Leonard Retzloff.
I was just going to throw out there that let's not confuse the terminology that staff has used to describe a change. Minor revision refers to internal consistency, improving and updating some content, clarifying the intent, data accuracy, formatting and grammar type changes. And major were basically any other changes beyond that. So it could be a boundary change that is not substantial in its impact or effect. It's just not a grammatical change, so we call it major instead of minor.
Okay. So
Who had the floor before?
Okay, Dave.
Julie. Oh,
Can you let me know what the Wisconsin state statute is that you're referring to?
66.1001.
Trustee Kaminsky?
Comment about maybe, it could be totally off base, okay? But to make sure that this goes smoothly and we get changes that we might want, and we do it all legally so we don't have repercussions, is there a way to state these amendments that say we will recommend to the Plan Commission that they make this change? And then it would go back to the Plan Commission to ultimately approve it. That way, my fear is what we think is a minor or major change, somebody else might think it's not. I mean, Isabel Farms thinks it's a major change that we did what we did at the last Plan Committee meeting. So, I mean, it's very subjective, and I would rather do things as totally legal as we can, because we can sit here and say all night, nobody's going to care, nobody's going to sue us. There's no precedent, but you know what? Precedent starts somewhere. And that somewhere could end up costing Germantown a lot of money in legal fees. So I just want to be sure we do this very correctly. And if it means recommending to the Plan Commission that they accept these changes, I think that's pretty firm what we're saying. This is what the village board wants. And I know that Trustee Baum could take that back, and so could President Walter, because they're both on the Plan Commission. I just think that might be the smoothest, cleanest way to do this. Just a thought.
So within that realm and in that frame of reference, if these recommendations would be before the Plan Commission or sent to the Plan Commission as recommendations of change from the village board, could the village board then add to that, I call it the last motion, that if the Plan Commission accepts these as presented, then the plan would be approved? Or does it have to come back again and then we have to vote on it after it comes back from the village board as in that ping?
I think you probably could do that your approval would be of what you've presented. And if you then have a matching document, then you could say that that works. The other thing that I would add too is just recognize that sometimes you have to get creative with things. So for example, and I don't know whether it's the intent or not, I wasn't at Plan Commission, but a major change where you go from, here are all the possible uses in the Holy Hill district, versus here are all the uses in the Isabel Farms district. The possibilities of uses are much different. And that's why, to me, it's a major change. That you could do things to accomplish the same effect that probably wouldn't be a major change. For example, you could make the change to the Holy Hill Gateway District language to reflect what the intent arguably was of the Plan Commission. That, add language that says something along the lines of, with respect to the property that abuts the Isabel Farms District, that we would look to limit the potential uses to, a subset of the overall potential uses within that district. That is probably more of a minor change than a major change. Now, again, that doesn't get you to its single family and single family only, which is what Isabel Farms effectively says. But it certainly reflects better probably what the Plan Commission intended. So there are different ways to potentially skin the same problem as well.
Trustee Baum?
So as I've gone back and forth with the residents of the 3 areas in question, we have recognized that a refined plan is not going to be established until We have the neighborhood meetings, the in-depth discussions, the negotiations as to what you think goes here, what I think goes here, what they think goes here. And that is going to take time. If you want to get down to that level of, should I allow a single family 1 acre parcel on the corner of Goldendale and Holy Hill Road? Is that what is the best use for that property? One of the discussions that we have had that I've been bantering back and forth is an area that is independent of everything else. It's an area that is in question. Can we define 3 areas of this community as an area of significant interest that needs to have residential input, needs to have community input, needs to have owner input, developer input, and simply isn't going to be established anytime soon because it is very questionable as to what should go there today and what should go there tomorrow. The property in question, this intersection of Goldendale and Holy Hill Road, the residents of Isabel Farms are looking for one thing. The developer, the owner of the property, is looking for something else. A developer that comes in is going to be looking for a third thing. Until we actually get into the nitty-gritty of let's all sit down and figure out what is actually going to go here, what is going to work here, I'm not sure that an actual layout for this area can be determined anytime soon. So what I'd like to do is call out this area, Isabel Farms, the north half and the south half on the previous document above and below the purple line as an area of significant influence. And let's just call that what it is. It is a controversial area. Let's set some criteria for figuring out what is going to happen in there and isolate it on the plan as something that is not going to be determined today, but is going to be working with residents, developers, and owners to figure out over time. You're never going to make everybody happy tonight on 3 areas of this village.
4.
And you say 4, I say 3, because I have been back and forth with residents all week since last Monday on 3 areas, not 4. It was Lannon Road and County Line Road. It was south of Woodside, and it was the north end of Isabel Farms. Those are the 3 areas that I have been going back and forth with people on. And in my discussions, I'm not going to come to a consensus with all the people involved on those areas. Those areas, you have to sit down and take the time to work with everybody and get everybody's input before you can finalize what's going to happen there. I'll make a motion that we do something different with that.
Have a motion to
I
amend.
know, but I will, if we get through this, I'll make a motion that those 3 areas be called out as separate areas and move on to what we can do with those. But
And then would you consider that a major change?
no, it's not a major change because when you look at the overall impact of the village, when you look at the 3 areas that I'm talking about, it's not what I see up there right now. Look at the area below Woodside. Katie, it's not that west end of Woodside that you're offended with. It's the part right below it between you, Woodside, and the industrial development where the Waller Tower is. There's an area of land there that you are concerned about. I want to have the discussions with all the people to decide what we're going to do with that. I want to have the discussions with the Isabel Farms people and the owners of the property and potential developers north of Isabel Farms. What are we going to do with this little area? If you got an overall of the village, you can see how small these areas are. And at the last village board meeting, plan commission meeting, Lannon Road and County Line, we said, okay, let's go ahead and change this little area to residential. It's changing from industrial and commercial to residential because that's what the residents wanted. And the plan commission was okay with that. But now it's controversial because I again said, hey, let's put some interest at the intersection. And people didn't like the fact that I'm acceptable to an apartment complex, something that accentuates the intersection. Maybe we drop that down to townhouses. Maybe we drop it down to single-family homes. It's got to have a discussion. But these are three small areas that are not, from my perception, not a significant impact to the overall 2050 plan. But I'm willing to isolate those areas and say, hey, let's leave them as there is right now. Let's leave them as the two properties up in this area, Holy Hill, are agricultural. Let's leave them as agricultural for now. And the area down by Lannon and County Line, let's leave it what it is today until we can get all the meetings taken care of. And then we can decide what happens on those three little areas. I'm fine with pulling those three out and spending more time looking at them and figuring out what really wants to go there.
Trustee Pieper.
Motion to call the question.
Second,
Vote on that, correct?
What's the motion?
What is the motion?
Well, the first motion is just whether or not you're going to vote on the motion that's being debated. And then if that passes, then you will immediately go to a vote on the motion, which is.
The amendment. To change Isabel Farms.
Restate the
So
amendment.
first, we have to vote on the motion to call the question.
So the amendment motion I have, motion by trustee Jan Miller, second by trustee Pieper, that the quadrant that was Isabel Farms and changed to the Holy Hill Gateway District move back to the Isabel Farms neighborhood.
All those in favor of calling a question, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Motion carries. All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? One opposed. Motion carries. Back to the motion as amended. Further discussion. Trustee Rick Miller.
David, I like your idea, and I guess I look at it a little bit different is that, yeah, we should probably pull these areas out right now and leave them what they are in the 2020 plan.
Sure.
Right? And the 2050 plan is just a new document. It's something that can be changed.
Yep.
The 2020 plan changed many, many times.
Yep.
And with bringing these in question, leaving them where they are right now in the 2020 plan, that gives time to look at it a little bit more and be able to really dig deep into it and find out what we want to do with that. Just like this part that we just agreed to put back in Isabella Farms. 10 years from now, 15 years from now, there could be a very good reason for development there. And the Plan Commission and board would say, yep, this makes sense, and we're going to change the 2050 plan. That's how it works. This thing isn't cast in stone. It's not black and white. So I agree with David. Let's pull these out, put them back to where they are now, those few little areas, and then we can work on those. And at the time, then make a change to the 2050 plan when we decide what that is actually going to become.
Is that a motion?
Sure. I don't know how I would make that a motion. Let me think about that.
Further discussion. Trustee Jan Miller.
You know, I understand what you're saying, David, and Rick. But the reality is pretty much when we had these workshops, the residents begged the Plan Commission to have neighborhood meetings. And then we heard this, we've got to get the 2050 plan done. We've got to get this 2050 plan done. And we weren't going to do any neighborhood meetings and just adopt the 2050 plan. And then whatever it is, it is. And I disagree with that. I've always said we should take the time to have the neighborhood meetings, get it all done. However, that wasn't the process, okay? We had people come in, we had our little charts, we drew on them. Some of it went through, and some of it was changed in the 11th hour. Like this quadrant here, whatever you want to call it. This was proposed, this was the handout in the joint meeting. It wasn't just a Plan Commission meeting. And everybody else has to come to the Plan Commission meeting and present their program. So there is no plan that I know of that Jeff and his staff have. I don't know for sure, but so to say, oh, we'll just put it off and then everybody wants to adopt this, and then when we try to get it back on the agenda, we have so many other things to do, right? So we went down this path, we're all gathered. They said, let's make some changes, and that's kind of what we're doing. So does it need more care? Does it need more input? We keep getting emails. They're here tonight because they have concerns, but we can't listen to them because it's a special meeting. We have emails they sent, but we can't read them because it's a special meeting. These are our residents. They voted for us. We're representing them. I don't want to do the ping pong thing with the Plan Commission either. I mean, what we say, I think makes good sense, right? So I don't want any gray areas. If you want to pull them, then I don't think it's a good idea.
Trustee Kaminsky.
I tend to agree with Trustee Rick and Trustee David Baum that we can pull these areas and have these future meetings. I think for those of us who have been on the village board for a long time and know how the 2020 plan, how many times it's been changed. I mean, this is not a document that's, as Rick tried to mention, is written in stone. You can still have neighborhood meetings. This is going to be totally potentially different in many ways in 15 years. We have no idea what's going to happen in 15 years. So that's why I am comfortable pulling those areas and doing those meetings as Trustee Baum had suggested, and approving this with those remaining in the 2020 version of themselves, which nobody had any problem with. I mean, we're not going to hammer out exactly what's going to happen. It's not a possibility, nor was it ever meant to be in creating this plan. We're overthinking it in that sense.
Further discussion? Trustee Baum.
I'm going to make a motion that we isolate the area west and south of Woodside neighborhood as a special interest area. I'm going to included in that motion is the area on the north end of Isabel Farms is a special interest area. And the area at the intersection of Lannon Road and County Line Road, currently known as the Lannon Gateway, be identified as special interest areas. That those three areas are to remain in their current zoning until we can complete neighborhood meetings and put together a plan for what should happen in those three areas.
Second.
When you say,
Attorney?
when you say zoning, you mean the current comprehensive plan classification?
Yes, that's what I mean. Yes.
Motion made and seconded. Motion to amend made and seconded. Discussion. Trustee Chan Miller.
I would like to include the Willow Creek because you can't move the Lannon Gateway without moving the Willow Creek. Right now, it's all Willow Creek.
Can you pull up Willow Creek?
No, it's, right now it's Lanning
I mean-
Gateway.
The last,
No,
the last plan shows this as Lanning Gateway,
Right.
and it's that area and only that area that I understand is in question.
but you changed it at the last minute.
We did
meeting.
to residential, as
Yeah.
it shows here in map exhibit 2.
But the
But it needs
residents,
to be,
It is residential.
the
It needs to
residents
be-
in the neighborhood are not satisfied with it just going to residential. They want to see
single family.
they want to see a plan for the area, because in my discussions at the village board, I said at the intersection, I could see something more substantial to identify that as a gateway. I didn't see it as just single-family homes, so I allowed more than just single-family homes.
Yes, you did, but that's not what,
As in any residential area would allow for the discussion of multifamily or condominiums. All it is residential. It went from commercial and industrial to residential. From what we heard in the meetings that we had in regards to the development that was first proposed here and some of the meetings for the 2050 plan, people in the surrounding area, including on the other side of County Line Road, wished it to be residential. That's what it was moved to.
right, but
Some of
you,
the emails that I received said that they were against that and wanted to see it go back. If we move it back, it goes back to purple. Because that's the way that it was originally proposed.
it's the density. Do you change the density?
It's residential. The density is determined based on the zoning of what that is.
All right, can I? So
Village attorney.
I think one of the things that we
back.
need to keep in mind as you're looking at this is that, you know, in some ways, we're like in the middle ring of the circus, right? And everybody's focused on what we're doing tonight. And there's a difference between what I'm hearing the discussions be versus what really the comprehensive plan is. Remember that the comprehensive plan is what we envision for potential uses in an area. And then we start talking about details. Well, we're going to allow townhouses here, but not there. We're going to put more dense here, less dense there. You know, all of those types of things, you know, maybe within the same classification. Maybe it's, you know, under the residential classification, but how dense are we going to be? Remember that's the next step. That's really the implementation of the plan, where we then sit down and we look at the zoning code and we say, okay, does the zoning code reflect what those goals that have been established in the comprehensive plan, you know, does it meet that or not? And you can set that density and all of those things otherwise. You know, I think that's the key thing that you need to remember is that what we're looking for is what we're trying to set tonight is that big policy. This is what we see for 2050 in terms of what potentially this area could look like. Now, it doesn't mean that we have to change the zoning immediately to say, you know, okay, all of this land now is going to be, you know, available for commercial development. You know, in the case of the Willow Creek area here, you know, you can, you know, phase that in. Certainly, we've done that previously. Likewise, you could change it right away. You could, you know, in the case of, you know, for example, the area by Isabel Farms, you could come back with a code amendment plan commission at their next meeting and say, we're going to specify exactly what the rules are for this little area, and to do that. But I think we need to focus more big picture here a little bit and not necessarily on the specifics, because you're going to get lost in those details over what it is that we're trying to do. And I think Jeff has something that kind of jumps on top of that.
Thank you, Brian. Yes, I'm not going to argue against the special classification you want to assign to 3 areas or 4. What I will say is that the current proposed plan contemplates exactly what David Baum and Rick Miller have articulated this evening, and that is to go from the general policy statement that Brian just described to a more refined land use concept plan that we did for a couple of areas in the plan, including the one that I showed on the screen for the Holy Hill and the Freistadt districts. That graphic right there, with the intention that when the plan is adopted, this would be the starting point for the more detailed master plan activity for this particular area. In fact, in the implementation section of the document under economic development, we've got two activities. One, develop a master plan for the Holy Hill Gateway District to ensure compatible industrial expansion in Germantown by providing aesthetically appealing development along highly visible thoroughfares and to ensure industrial expansion that is compatible with non-industrial surrounding land uses. And the second activity is develop the Village Center District, including a master plan to enhance Main Street, Mequon Road, and so on and so forth. So the strategy was never, as Jan pointed out correctly, to do these detailed individual neighbor plans for all 32 neighborhood districts and corridors. We touched upon a couple of them, the Holy Hill Gateway Freistadt area, the Village Center District. And then we were going to come back and do the more thorough, detailed master planning for those particular areas and prioritize all the other ones and just knock them off one after another based on a priority schedule.
Yep.
In fact, what you'll see coming up is we've tried to budget some money for next year to carry out some of these activities immediately. We want to hit the ground running and do these detailed master plan areas, including Holy Hill Gateway and the Village Center. That's the strategy. That's what's on track to set up in this particular plan. I don't know that pulling out or calling out those areas as special areas is really necessary. You can if you want to, but I personally don't think it's necessary. I know what you're driving at and want us to do, and I agree with it.
Trustee Baum?
I personally am comfortable with the process that we laid out. The residents are not. That's what I'm trying to address, is give the residents some comfort that these specific areas will be identified and planned out in some level of detail before a developer comes in and starts plowing under the fields. That's what they're looking for. They're looking to have some input. So that's why I've specifically said these 3 areas, because those are the areas I've talked to the residents about. They're looking for them to have interest, have input.
Could I offer one follow-up?
Sure.
I would say with respect to the Lannon Gateway neighborhood, the earlier motion, I believe, said to essentially revert back to the 2020 plan. I had up for a brief moment the 2020 plan for that area, and if you recall,
It's purple and red.
it's purple and red. It's
Yeah.
all commercial and industrial,
Yeah.
which is what we received the development proposal from Dickman and Fiduciary in response to.
And that's why if I highlight this area in red and white stripes, as I've been promoting to people, that is an area of special interest. It may revert back to this red and purple, but that's not what anybody wants in this area, and it needs some special attention. That's all I'm trying to identify by red and white stripes.
But
Special
what is your intent in terms of what's there? We already know that the legislature has taken away our ability to do a moratorium. You can't say you can't
Can't
develop here.
No, the intent is, so if I have to put rules on a red and white zone, it would be that prior to any development, you have to have a series, 2, maybe 3 neighborhood meetings to get input from the residents of the area. You would have to have a master plan of an enlarged area, more than just a lot. You would then have to go before Plan Commission, then have to go before Village Board through public hearings. I think at a minimum, that allows the residents to have multiple say, multiple input on what they believe this area is. They can see some alternative ideas and a big comments on.
Could I jump in? I agree with that type of activity and those parameters. I mean, it's something we've talked about in the past that I've done in a previous life down in Florida where we did something called sector planning. The key part was that you couldn't propose rezoning until a sector plan was done, and it was either to be done by the staff or the private developer initiated that, and was to be reviewed by staff. So it was a way to get around the whole, the community has to prioritize and do all of these, right away and spend whatever money it takes to get that done. You can, and I would respectfully ask if that's appropriate for tonight, give us some priority list for these particular areas. Which one's more important? Village Center, Holy Hill Gateway, County Line and Lannon? Are there others?
I'll be happy to give you priorities of mine. Village board has to weigh in on the rest of it.
Trustee Jan Miller.
I think with the Lannon Road or Lannon Gateway neighborhood and Willow Creek, the way it's on this map that you gave us 9/7 draft is the closest thing that we have that would be acceptable. So, and then the other map where you have the 3 circles is another good map. But when you take Lannon Gateway and Willow Creek, those are I call those 2 separate areas. One's residential, one is industrial. It's literally in the same area, but they're 2 different uses. So I don't think that should change that much. And I understand what you're saying, Jeff and David, but I didn't hear I didn't hear Jeff say residents. It should be the residents' input. That's what we're concerned about because we got so many emails, phone calls, and concerns about not only traffic, but how they're using the land. And there are wetlands in the Willow Creek Business Park District. So how are you going to address that? So I think that if you can't, I don't know that you want to leave them blank or red and white. I'm not sure. I think you could just identify the picture that it's most closely related to on your map.
We're trying to get a map that identifies. So might I clarify the motion that the area south and west of Willow neighborhood is identified as special interest. The area north of Isabel Farms is special interest. Those 2 areas will stay at the 2020 land use identification. Lannon Road Gateway will maintain the 2013 identification as residential, but still be identified as a special interest area.
You mean September 13th draft?
Isn't that what I said? What did I say? I meant that one on the screen right there.
2013.
September 13th, the one right on the screen there.
Getting in the weeds.
Yes, we are. But if that makes people happy, I will gladly get deeper into the weeds if I have to.
Trustee Paper.
Can't believe I'm doing this again. Motion to call the question.
Second,
Did we state the motion?
Yes, please restate the motion.
Amendment motion by Baum, second by Pieper to isolate the area west and south of Woodside, the area on north end of Isabel Farms as special interest, and area Landon and County Line Road Gateway as special interest, remain in the current zoning, current classification of 2020 plan until complete neighborhood meetings and put together a plan. And then area south and west of Willow Creek neighborhood is special interest. Area north of Isabel is special interest and stay as of 2020 identification. And then Landon Gateway maintain the 913 map and special interest.
Yes,
Or September 13th.
September 13th.
Okay.
Close enough.
There was some duplication in there.
There was.
There was.
Very correct. Yeah.
You want me to go through it again? I'll be happy to.
Please.
Yeah, let's all be clear on what we're voting on here. Wait, but don't we have, yeah,
We
Okay.
want to know, but if you call the question, you have to go right to the vote. So
okay.
people are going to want to know what they're voting for.
So if you can go to your circles.
Yeah, but you're
of-
changing it.
No, I'm not. Okay,
Once.
in this area here. The, what is it, Woodside? Now I'm questioning what you're, Woodside neighborhood, which is Woodside neighborhood.
Yeah.
It is currently highlighted in red and white to the west of Woodside. I would take that red and white and go all the way to 4145. I would drop it down to Rockfield Road and then end it at Country Goldendale. So it's an L-shaped portion that is a highlighted area. That is Zone 1. Isabel Farms. I would take the highlighted area that is currently shown there and extend it down to the actual north end of Isabel Farms, so that I get both the north and south half of the subject property. That would be a special interest area. Then if we can go to the Lannon Road area, this whole area should be changed to a special interest for residential. That is my motion, to make those three areas identified as that.
Everybody's clear on that, and that's how the second understood it?
Who's second?
All right, all in favor of calling the motion, please say aye. Point of reference, please say aye.
Aye.
We didn't take the vote.
First, we have to vote for,
The question
point.
yet.
right, correct. So all in favor of calling the question, please say aye.
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 Opposed?
Yeah,
Aye. Opposed, raise your hands.
Oh.
Motion fails. Back to discussion. Trustee Rick Miller.
Yeah, just one clarification. The zoning in the north end around Woodside neighborhood, that would remain the 2020 plan.
Which is currently agricultural. is that-
Agricultural, right. But the one on the south, the Lannon Gateway, we would want to
We would revert
use that
to
as residential
the
rather
23rd
than the,
the September 13th plan
Okay.
that shows that as all residential.
that's what I wanted to clarify. So the top four in question, around Woodside and around Isabel Farms, is going to revert back to what the current 2020 plan
Which
is.
is
The
agricultural,
other one, we're going to
convert to residential.
update, or actually, that's part of the 2050 plan, right? So
Yeah.
isn't that just adopt the 2050?
No, because it's refinements of it. It's got to be refined.
Trustee Hudson.
so we can sit here and do this until probably Halloween is my guess at this. If we're going to make any traction on this, we need to take these one at a time, just like we did with the Isabel Farm, which we came to a conclusion on. We voted on a motion, and we accepted the motion. And now we're trying to go back and change something that we've already done. So at this point in time, unless we all want to sit here for forever, which is fine with me, we need to develop a strategy as to how this board is going to go forward instead of continually going around in circles. I thought we had decided that we're going to take these one at a time and do a vote. Are we going to do that or are we not going to do that?
Well, it was started that way until trustee Baum made the motion and brought it up for discussion. Trustee Baum.
I'll be happy to change my motion to separate it into 3 parts. I will,
We're already done with
Let
one.
this one go
We
and
only
see
got
how
2
it
left.
goes.
I'll rescind my motion and I will make a new motion. Is that okay with the second?
Good with me.
Okay, my motion is rescinded. My motion will be that we amend the property south of Woodside and west of Woodside, as I earlier defined, to revert back to the 2020 land use plan and identify that area as a area of special interest.
Motion and second and discussion. Trustee Kaminsky.
Just a question, or I guess a comment. The reversion, for example, if there's developer interest in an ag parcel, and now we're saying you can't develop this until after we have all these neighborhood meetings, correct?
Yes.
So we have to have some kind of reference point or timeline on when these meetings would take place, or this is blatantly unfair to the owner of that property.
My position is, Mr. Developer, present the plan, and that will initiate all the neighborhood meetings. Here's an opportunity that we have to develop. What do you guys think of this? Oh, you want this as industrial? I want it as single-family homes. There's going to have to be a negotiations between all the parties involved. A developer coming forward just sets it all in motion.
Okay, so that would initiate the meeting. So if a developer comes forward tomorrow, that is what takes place at the Plan Commission without delay.
Plan commission, neighborhood meetings,
Whoever's. at
Yeah,
the-
all of it.
Probably Plan Commission's at the
start of it,
beginning of that, I would
start of
think.
it, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
That's easy. I thought that your special areas were going to be a priority of the plan commission to start hammering those out, not when a developer came forward.
Okay, there's 2 things that I've worked out with the neighbors. One is we have identified these are areas we want to get done,
Yes.
and we're going to prioritize them. Well, if I don't prioritize this until 3rd priority and I spend 2 months working on this, but a developer comes in and says, I want to do this. Well, we got to move this up. We got to highlight this. We got to get this on board faster.
Like, my concern echoes trustee Kaminsky's concern a little bit. You're starting to restrict the private landowner in a serious way that could bring a lawsuit.
To what degree? What's your
To
concern?
the degree that, let's go back to the Lannon Gateway neighborhood.
Okay,
And let's say that developer waited his time and said, okay, I'm going to bring it back.
okay.
And we say, oh, wait a minute. We decided that in order to do that, you got to have 2 months worth of meetings or whatever the criteria is.
Yeah.
And that landowner says, you're restricting my ability to sell this land because I have a developer online now. And he's not willing to wait your 3 months or 2 months or 8 weeks or whatever it was. And now I'm going to sue you because you've restricted my ability to sell this land.
I will defer.
It is a possibility.
I have been involved in more lawsuits on real estate than I care to talk about, but I will defer to the village attorney that if this is identified as a special interest area and has criteria established that you have to have 3 neighborhood meetings, you have to come before a public hearing of the plan commission, you have to come before the plan commission, you have to come before the village board. If that is identified as what has to be done in these special interest areas, My understanding is, nope, that is a notified requirement of this development and no developer can sue you for it.
Well, I have two immediate thoughts on that. The first is that you're walking a fine line between a moratorium and not under Wisconsin statutes. It may have been okay in Florida. It may have been even okay in Wisconsin up till 6 years ago, I think, is when that statute changed with respect to moratoriums. And so I worry a little bit about that. The more critical thought that I have is that the comprehensive plan doesn't make law. It's not an ordinance. And so if you, just using the one that's on the screen, for example, you say the Landon Gateway neighborhood, and we're going to say that that's what we're going to classify it as, but we're going to highlight it and we're going to look at the rules and we're going to figure out what's going on there. If somebody comes in with a proposal tomorrow and says, I'd like to develop this in a way that is consistent with the Landon Gateway Neighborhood District as it's defined within the plan, if you deny that, you run the risk of being sued because you're not following your comprehensive plan to do that. Now, you could come back tomorrow and propose, hey, we're going to add to our zoning code in these districts, specific requirements that need to be done, and we could work on that to do it. But if somebody comes forward between now and whenever that code changes to highlight those specific process that would need to take place,
So
you got to react to it.
correct me if I'm wrong, when I make a motion on this property, the area at Landon Road, if I make a motion to revert back to the 2020 plan, anybody coming forward with industrial or retail in that quadrant can do so. You can bring forward a plan, and much like the last plan that came forward with industrial and commercial, well, no, they didn't even come forward with industrial and commercial. It came forward with residential.
No, started with commercial on the corner.
Started with commercial with a gas station at the corner.
Correct.
Why didn't we get sued on that? We didn't approve that.
They withdrew the application.
They withdrew the application. So if anybody can come forward with industrial in certain parts of that and retail in other parts of that, and fine, we have to accept that because that has been what the plan has been for God knows how many years. But if we want to change it, we want to move it to a special interest that we are looking at re-identifying this area to something different. How do we do that until we know what exactly we want there?
Well, as I've suggested, I mean, the problem with your approach at the end of the day is that you're confusing the plan, the concept with what do the details look like?
Yeah.
And the way that we typically deal with that is that we approve the big plan, whatever it looks like.
Yep.
And we say, here's our plan, we identify all the areas, and then we come back and we look at the zoning and we say, okay, the zoning in this particular area doesn't match what you want to do. I mean, what you're really suggesting is that you are trying to say, we're going to identify these areas as something. And it's fluctuated a little bit. Is it going to be, we're going to keep it as the residential, or are we going to go back to the 2020 plan? Whichever one, ultimately, there's going to be some identification with the direction the Plan Commission to say, okay, you're going to prioritize looking at these areas to do the zoning and the planning as it relates to those areas to identify what it is that we're going to move forward with.
So if I may paraphrase, in your words, we should just approve the overall 2050 plan and get into the weeds of these three specific areas at a later date? Is that what you're intending? Is that what I should do?
That is generally the concept. Yes. Now, I recognize that may not be.
It's not going to bode well with the residents over here.
Well, but at the end of the day, that's this body's decision to say, okay, do we agree with the plan commission when they say this is what we view the future to potentially be? Now let's refine that and figure out where we go with it. Or do you want to say, you know what, we don't agree with the plan commission. This isn't residential, or this isn't commercial or industrial or whatever, but instead we think it should be X. And then you set that, and obviously if you're, if you're conflicting with what the plan commission says, we go back to that first discussion we had. Is this a significant change or not? Are we sending it back to plan commission, or are we just saying, hey, we're going to run with it? That's ultimately a question. But it's for this body at the end of the day to say, you know what, we either agree or we don't agree with what the plan commission has identified as what the big picture is. And once we have the big picture, how we attack the details of all of the, because it's not just these three areas that we need to go through and analyze and make zoning changes for and figure out what takes place. There's plenty of other areas within the community where the new master plan will require amendments and modifications of the zoning code to reflect what we're heading towards, what we'd like to see to try to encourage development in particular methods. That's ultimately what this body's action should be doing, is to say, yep, this is the plan. Now let's get to work on the details. But those details can only be made at the end of the day once you've said, here's what the big plan is. And if the big plan is what plan commission, for example, in, again, the Lannon Gateway neighborhood, that we're going to keep this more of a residential theme, and we're all okay with that, then you can say, yeah, we're going to run with it and do it. But if we think, well, you know what, maybe plan commission got it wrong, and extending the Willow Creek Business District into that corner is the appropriate method, then that's the decision that you have. And once you've done that, you can identify the specific rules that you want to identify. And maybe you don't. Maybe you just leave the current zoning as is, and then you let a developer come forward and say, hey, I'd like to do X. And then you analyze it just like we've done for 20 years. Hey, here's what the comprehensive plan says. Here's what's desirable. Here's what's undesirable. What you're proposing is either consistent or not consistent with the plan, and we're going to approve it appropriately.
Okay.
That's certainly an option too.
I see none of these three areas as major changes to the plan. They just are areas that we need to refine as we go into the implementation area.
Trustee Hudson.
I apologize. It really doesn't matter how we see them, right? So our attorney has said that if we adopt this, we are taking a legal risk and being potentially sued. So how we view these changes is really irrelevant. And again, please tell me if I'm wrong. What you are recommending is to send these back to the Planning Commission and have them certify this. And we can do what President Walter said, but you are talking about a legal risk which will put taxpayer dollars on the line should we decide this is a major change or this is a minor change. Am I summing that up fairly?
Close. So I think the two nits that I would have is number one, I don't know. I mean, other than paying me to defend the lawsuit, you're probably not putting any dollars at risk. What you're doing is potentially angering neighbors who then have to live with a plan that gets forced upon them as part of the resolution. That would be nit number one. Nit number two would be that at the end of the day, one of the reasons why I brought that up at the beginning is that this type of process at the end of the day is what we call a legislative decision. And the courts have made it very clear that when it comes to legislative decisions, we're going to step out of it. But that's only to the extent that we've got a record that the court can look at and say, hey, did they look at this or did they not look at this? That's why we want to discuss these things, to say, hey, this either is or isn't a substantial change for whatever reasons we ultimately determine. Because as I say, it's not something that the statute says, if A, B, and C happen, then that's what takes place. The substantial change language is really, the opinions of various municipal attorneys, Claire at the league and, others that have said, here's how we interpret the statute. I tend to agree with the interpretation by and large. But it's not like the statute says, here, if you meet A, B, and C, you've got a substantial change. And if you don't meet all of them, then you've got a minor change. So at the end of the day, it really is this body's determination. But I would caution you that if you're going to make that determination, you just do so with analysis and thought that we put on the record so that if it does get challenged, the court can look at it and say, oh yeah, these guys thought about it. You made a legislative decision based on what's before you.
Trustee Rick Miller.
Yeah, I'd like to get back to the motion on the table.
What is it?
Which is the Woodside neighborhood area. And this might be my simple understanding of this, but if we move these lines like we just proposed in the motion, that means that those two areas to the south of Woodside neighborhood over to Goldendale and to the west of there becomes the Rural Preservation District right now, because that's what's in the 2020 plan. It's zoned ag. I'm not zoned, I'm sorry. It's proposed as ag. It's purple,
Purple in the current plan.
all the way to Woodside?
I think
I
you're
thought it was on
confusing the
Rockfield.
current plan with the 2020 plan.
Right.
There's the
I
2020
said the
plan.
2020 plan.
You show me the two of them?
Yes, can you bring up the 2020 plan?
The 2020 plan, it's ag.
Right, it's agriculture / conservation residential.
So if we do that, number one, that gives,
Goes back to that.
it goes back to that, right? And what happens is that gives the village and the residents time to really start developing that, right? There's probably going to be an adjustment at some point to the 2050 plan that may look a little bit different and come back purple. I don't know. But if we do that, that gives it time. It becomes part of the Rural Preservation District. That satisfies the residents of Woodside right now. And honestly, that will become one of the first areas of concentration that we look at in depth. That's how I understand that this motion would be handled. Now, does that restrict the landowner right now? Not any more than he is, right? I mean, it's in the 2020 plan, it's already restricted. However, if a developer comes here, half of the Gateway District was developed because we had a developer that wanted to develop it, right? And that's what started the whole thing. Well, it's the same thing here. If a developer comes in and wants to go north of Rockfield Road, okay, the Plan Commission would have to look at that. We'd have to, determine if that was the best use for there. The residents would have their say because we'd have a public hearing about it. The 2050 plan would have to be altered. All that happens. But right now, if we go back to this, that gives us a little bit of time. That comes back to agriculture, and we can develop the plan further. And I don't think right now, sure, area of concentration for Isabella Farms, yeah, understood. That should be looked at as well. And same thing with Lannon and Gateway neighborhood. But right now, the zoning is really something that is what we want for zoning right now. So do we really need to change any of those or make another motion? Probably not. I think this is the only one that I had in question is to protect Woodside neighborhood and give them a little bit more say in how that development looks over there.
Further discussion? Trustee Kaminsky.
In the discussion we're having here, the part that bothers me, once again, is that we don't want to be ridiculously restrictive. And I think it's extremely restrictive if we hold these specific neighborhoods to a different criteria than we are currently, anybody that wants to develop any part of Germantown. You go through the process, you go through the Plan Commission, you go through your public hearing. I do not want to vary from the process or make these special cases. Adamantly do not want to do that. I don't think that's right. Then I'll suggest my Mary Booth Lane should be one of these special neighborhoods. That's the next thing that's going to happen. Everybody's going to want to be special. Nobody's going to want to follow anything. leave everything in place the way we do it now. It's a process that has worked. You come before the plan commission if you want to develop your parcel. If you have to seek rezoning, you seek rezoning. You go through your public hearing, not 3 or 4 public hearings over 6 months or something ridiculously restrictive that's going to hurt development. That's not fair. And people who know me know I love the rural flavor of Germantown, and I'm the one that says we should tap the brakes on development. However, more than that, I want to be fair to everybody here. And I think that fairness is missing when we try to put all these different bells and whistles of restrictions on these particular neighborhoods. I don't like that. And if that's part of this motion, which I don't believe it is at this point, but if that is part of this motion, I cannot support it.
Trustee Jan Miller.
So do we still have the amendment that we voted on for Isabel Farms?
Yes.
Done and done,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Thank you. And our question, Trustee Kaminsky, are you suggesting in the Lannon and what do they call that? No, Willow Creek Business District to use the second draft, September 13th, or not?
Frankly, I don't care if we use the 2020 plan or if we use the new plan. But I think what we're doing here is just trying to stretch. It's not one size fits all. We're trying to stretch this. Like, oh, these people over here don't want that, so let's change it over here. That's almost like a spot zoning thing. And I think we're losing sight once again of the fact that this is just a big, broad brush stroke
But it is a
up to
neighborhood,
2050.
right? But it
And
is-
I think we're losing that. And I think that we're getting way bogged down here. We're not making specific decisions right now. So whether we leave it 2020 or whether we switch that part to our current plan, I don't really care. All I care about is we follow our process that we have in place. Anybody coming in to try to develop there is going to have to go through what they went through, where the developer ended up pulling out because he didn't have support for that particular development. But to me, this is becoming almost ridiculous that we think that this can be so precise at this time. I think we're really wasting a lot of time.
Further discussion.
But it is a detailed plan.
This is an overview. Trustee Nyrider.
Why did we do the plan? Is my question, if we didn't want to make changes. Jeff, a question for you is based on the plan, and I know you can't give an accurate number, but percentage-wise, percentage-wise, what was changed as far as the uses throughout the village?
From 2020 to
From 2020 to
2050?
2050.
I really have no way of giving you any sort of percentage. Like I tried to describe early on in the conversation, we've gone from a parcel-based plan where we identified a specific use for each parcel to a plan where we've identified a neighborhood now, an area with some consistency, and then provided a range of uses, preferred uses, desirable, allowable, and undesirable, that would allow for a more latitude in terms of what could be proposed and also how it could be approved. Even though it says desirable, doesn't mean it's guaranteed. Whereas the parcel-based plan was more of a lockdown tight. If it was red, it was commercial. There was no other choices to be made. So it was more difficult to say no or to come up with something different. Personally and professionally, I like the direction we've taken with creating more latitude, but it comes with a lot more responsibility. It's not a menu selection sort of process. It's going to take some time and thinking and go through the process for each proposal that we have. I can't tell you what percentage, because really, Bill, it's sort of comparing an apple and an orange.
In either case, though, whether we leave the 2020 or we go to what was approved on the 2050 plan, the developer, the landowner still has the right in either case to come in and question and say, I want to do this versus what it's zoned for.
Right,
In either case.
correct, they could propose an amendment.
Right. So that's why I don't have a problem, making these changes. I don't feel we're singling out these areas. I think it's a right thing to do at this point. If it's something we saw that we don't think is right, I think that's our duty to do this at this point in time. So I personally don't have a problem doing this at all, because again, they have the opportunity to change that 10 years from now, whenever they come in and ask for it. It's not saying it's going to happen.
Question.
Oh, before I recognize you, can you read the motion?
That was my question.
Amendment motion by trustee Baum, second by trustee Rick Miller to amend the property south of Woodside and west of Woodside and revert back to the 2020 land use plan and identify the area as special interest.
And I would be willing to rescind my motion if we're just going to go back and vote on the 2050 plan. We don't have to get into the weeds and all this, and we're just going to vote on the 2050 plan. I'll stop talking about the special areas. So I will rescind my motion, if that's okay with my second.
Wait, it's the second one.
No, I would rather have it at just this one, just so that there's a buffer yet around Woodside.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Further discussion? No further discussion?
Just clarification,
Sure.
do you want it to be classified as rural preservation like the other green areas around that? Or do you want it truly to go back to what was?
Well, I
provided?
guess to go back to 2020, there isn't a rural preservation district, is there?
No, it's the ag/conservation residential has similar effect as far as allowing 5-acre lots, residential non-farm lots, if there's no water and sewer available.
And then
I mean, it's your motion. I didn't know.
that was the intent, is to go back to the original. Go back to the 2020 plan was the motion.
Okay. So we're clear. Trustee Kaminsky.
Just a question, how are we defining area of special interest?
I mean, how is it designated on the map?
Why, what is it going to mean if it's designated as an area of special interest? What does that mean? How do we unpack that?
I can only explain the intent that I had discussions with was that these areas that need review and want the residents' input, it's no different than a developer coming in and say, I want to rezone this property. You have to have public hearings, you have to have neighborhood meetings, you have to have plan commission approval, you have to have village board approval.
If it's no different, why do we have to have area of special interest in the motion?
If you want me to take it out, I'll be happy to take it out.
I would be happy if you took it out.
I will remove that from my motion and just have this area as defined reverted back to the 2020 plan as my motion.
Or new.
Second's okay with that.
All right, further discussion? No further discussion? Wow. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Back to the motion as amended. Further discussion?
Is there any area that somebody would want specific interest in, or are we just good with the 2050 plan?
I'm good with it.
Trustee
President.
Chan Miller.
I would like to make a motion to keep the Lannon Gateway neighborhood and the Willow Creek Business Park District as defined in draft 2,
Second,
913.
That,
second.
if there's no other changes made, it would be the one that would bring forward based on the recommendation from the plan commission.
2050?
Yes.
Okay.
that's
Okay.
Correct. Just so we are all understanding
Okay,
what that
I
means.
just-
Yes, it would show it as yellow.
As
That's what you'll
the
get.
number 2,
Yes.
Correct.
the one on the
Draft
right.
number 2, September 13th, on page 1 of 2, in the bottom
We're
right
not,
corner.
we're not doing the deep dive as on the backside.
Well, that would still be done, but it's part of the discussion of
It'll
that
be the-
area anyways, yes.
It'll be a discussion item.
Yes,
That's what I wanna
absolutely.
okay.
As
I
other
wanna make
areas should
sure.
be.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Do we have to vote on it?
Trustee Hudson, no, based on that, would you rescind your motion?
I want to make it so that it becomes a discussion item, like,
To approve the 2050, get this.
okay,
All right,
all right.
so you rescind your motion?
But I want,
But it's in there.
I know, but will they have a neighborhood meeting?
Then you'd have to make a motion to have a neighborhood.
No.
No?
If a developer comes in to develop something here, you're doing a master plan for this area, you have to have a neighborhood meeting
Okay.
to.
Talk so we all can hear.
We have to have a neighborhood meeting if somebody comes in.
My comment was if a master
correct?
developer comes in to redevelop the Landing Gateway neighborhood, a master plan of the area would initiate a neighborhood discussion, a public hearing.
Yes. Yes, it would. Further discussion. Trustee Myers.
Something for the first time. Actually, to be honest with you, I like Jeff's plan from the very beginning because it would have done the same thing that we're trying to do already. Oprah comes in, sit down and have a discussion, same thing. That's what Jeff wanted. He could have gone through this. What time it is? Probably an hour and a half ago. Anyhow, this is my 2 cents worth.
Thank you. Further discussion, trustee Rick Miller.
Yeah, just a question. We had discussed about approving this here or sending it back to Plan Commission. Would a motion to send it to Plan Commission have to happen before the vote?
I guess I would suggest that if there is thought that that would be done, that you would amend the motion as it currently sits, which is to approve the master plan, the 2050 plan as amended, to reflect the desire to send it back to Plan Commission because you feel that their input.
I mean, it sounds like since we moved 2 lines or 2 areas, is that a major revision? Now we're back to this question.
Bring it up.
It was a last minute discussion of a thought about how we could make some interest in the area.
So we're okay with not sending it back to Plan Commission?
It is a minor change. Yes.
All right.
Nothing in the state
You
statute.
vote as such. Further discussion, trustee Kaminsky.
To follow up on what trustee Miller just said, to be totally clean with this whole thing, it's so easy to make the motion dependent upon it going back for final approval to the Plan Commission. I mean, all we have to do is approve now with our changes, the 2050 plan as amended and send it back to them.
In essence, do you then make them the final approval?
Well, we say, no,
In the village board?
no. We're still the final approval. Yeah.
Per the statutes, it says that once it is adopted, it needs to be sent out to the planning commission anyway.
I'm not hearing a motion. Before we get there, we have before us a minor revision as changes of language to be placed into the 2050 plan to help better define what the county designates as
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Next Gen Housing Initiative.
I'll make a motion to take, let's see, who recommended this again? It's the.
It
county
comes from the county.
Development Department. Okay, I'll make a motion to take the edits that the Community Development Department had submitted to us and adopt that as part of the 2050 plan.
As part of the housing section on page 145.
Yep. So,
And you're going to take the recommendations as
Yeah.
stated? Okay. Discussion on that motion to amend. No discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Opposed? Motion
Nay.
carries. How many opposed? 2 opposed, motion carries.
Three.
3 opposed, Motion carries. We're gonna keep going.
It's outdated before it even
How many opposed? Raise your hands.
opposed.
Three opposed.
Opposed. It's
Or
outdated
opposed.
already.
Motion still carries. Back to the motion as amended. Further discussion? No further discussion? Trustee Myers?
This plan for the county for housing that maybe going to fall around $300,000, I think it was what was given to us when they presented it to us. We haven't had any discussion in regard to that. Are we just putting that in this 2050 plan?
This is just changing
Language.
the language on page 145. This is already in the 2050 plan. It's just the language describing what is it? The next gen housing. Yeah, it's literally changing definitions. The way that the 2050 plan was worded, or the next gen housing, the way it was worded in the 2050 plan, they did not like how it was being defined and wanted to make these corrections to make it more understandable and factual for the residents.
Thanks, Jan, for explaining that. My question is where is that going to be on the map?
Well, it's not on anywhere in the map. It's just, this is just
It's-
changing the language on page
It is
145. We
intended
didn't
that the
discuss
village will
next gen housing
participate
anywhere.
and complete preliminary steps towards the development of the village priority sites. So at this time, they are undefined.
Right, they're, if I could,
Mhm.
thank you. They're currently undefined as far as specific sites. We are working with the county at a staff level at this point, but the plan does include in the housing implementation section an objective to, and I'll read it, support regional housing initiatives that impact Germantown, including Washington County Next Generation Housing Initiative. And the specific action step is to maintain contact with the agencies such as Washington County. So we're cooperating with them, but it's really yet to be seen whether we're going to fully implement and participate. They still haven't defined exactly what it exactly means yet. They're still working through some of that at their level. So we're working with them, but we're not holding their hand, but we're walking aside with them as we go through this process. At some point, we'll have to make a decision
Right.
more specifically.
Some of that from myself personally would be to see what happens with their designated test sites that are in three other communities.
We have communities,
Right.
Hartford, Slinger.
But they're like Director Retzloff had stated, they're still defining what that is. I mean, we don't have a clear definition of what is, this type of housing as far as next gen housing. It's, in my opinion, it's changed 3 times since I've known it was originally proposed. So based on the funds that they're offering us instead of being a test site, which that doesn't bother me. I really don't want to be a test site, but because they have these as ARPA funds, they've designated their test site, and then the rest of the communities kind of get $50,000 to look and study as if we're in the village of Germantown, this could work. And we could come and say, you know what, doesn't work, but we're still following the plan. Or we could say, we think that it's best in this area because of these reasons, but those things still need to be discussed. Right now, it's just an agreement.
And I'll just say again, thank you, Jan, and thank you, Jeff, for explaining it. Thank you.
Trustee Jan Miller.
That was Jolene. Anyway, I would like Brian's opinion of this sentence. It is intended that the village, and Jeff, I'm guessing the village is Germantown, will participate in the Next Generation program and seek initial startup funds totaling now, instead of 50, it's $62,500 to complete preliminary steps toward the development of the village's priority sites, and they took out to be determined. So to me, that says that we've put a rubber stamp on this. And I thought that we had an initial, well, but
Go ahead.
my thought is that we sent Mr. Krecklow out to get from Vanderwall preliminary for $16,700. Does anybody remember that?
Yeah, we're still working on that.
So, so is that included in the 62,500 now?
It would be yes.
Well, it says that we will participate.
Yeah,
Well, because we are
we
participating.
are participating.
Right. No, it was like, we'll see what they come back with and then we'll see if we want to participate. Well,
Further discussion, trustee Hudson.
it doesn't.
Didn't we already vote on this?
Yes,
Why are we discussing it after the?
I don't know. Point of order, back to the motion as amended. Trustee Miller.
All right, I don't know how this is going to go, but I'm going to make a motion to send it back to Plan Commission for review. And if there are no changes, that the 2050 plan become adopted if we approve it tonight.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Motion to amend made and seconded. Discussion. Trustee Baum.
I would prefer if we could approve it condition upon Plan Commission accepting it.
That's what he said, I think.
Is it phrased that way? So it's approved tonight. They just gotta, okay. All right, I can,
Further discussion on a motion to
John,
amend.
Plan Commission Monday night.
No, not this Monday. That would be the village board meeting.
Question,
third.
would it need to go to a planning commission meeting and be approved by them to
Yes.
be enacted?
Yes,
Yes.
But it
It'll be on
came
the
from
next-
planning commission.
it'd be on the 10th.
Yes. Right away.
It'd be at the meeting at the 10th. No, you can't just phone them and say, hey, what do you think?
No, I
It needs to
know, I
be-
understand that, but it came from the planning commission. I don't get why we're sending it back to the planning commission.
Because
We're
of
also-
the legality of it and making sure that they are in agreement with what we feel are minor changes.
While I disagree with Attorney Sajak on his interpretation of that state statute, but so
Further
be it.
discussion on the motion as amended, or the motion to amend. No further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I
4, 5. Motion carries. Raise your hand. Opposed, raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, motion fails. So now we're going to approve it here?
Yes. I'll make we have a motion to approve it here?
Motion's already
Okay.
done.
We already have a motion to
Yes.
approve. With the amendments,
Yes.
we're voting on the ordinance 16-2022. This is to approve. Yes, trustee Miller.
I misinterpreted the motion. I did not want to vote for the motion.
So was that a reconsideration?
Consideration on my vote, please.
Yeah, you could do, well,
You voted in favor.
she wasn't in the winning side, so she couldn't ask for a reconsideration.
She was in the winning side. She voted in favor.
She wasn't originally.
She voted against taking it to the plan commission. And she says that she misunderstood the motion and would prefer it to go to the plan commission. And she misvoted, so she can ask for reconsideration
Yes.
because she voted in
Yes.
the majority.
Right.
So your motion now is for reconsideration of the last motion to amend based on you misinterpreted the motion, correct? That's your motion? You want a reconsideration because you thought that you were voting for something else?
Yes.
Okay,
Who seconded that?
nobody yet.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded.
But what's the yay and nay?
Discussion.
No discussion.
All in favor, please say aye.
Excuse me, can we,
Please
Can we
move
get
it.
reconsidered?
Asking, no, just give me a minute. You're asking because you felt, you understood the motion to be one way, and it actually, the motion was to take it to Plan Commission for final. If the Plan Commission accepts these changes, the plan's approved. That's what was the motion, but it's going to send it to Plan Commission for that purpose at the next Plan Commission meeting, which would be October 10th. You voted against that 5-4, and you thought that that wasn't, you wanted to vote in favor. So because you were on the majority of that vote, you can ask for reconsideration, and we can do the reconsideration now. Doesn't have to wait a week. It can be done now as part of Robert's rules. So with that, we have a motion for reconsideration and a second. All in favor of that reconsideration of the last vote, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed, raise your hands. 3, motion carries. Now we are reconsidering the last amended vote, which was to send it by Trustee Rick Miller, to send it to Plan Commission to accept the changes that we've made, and if they accept them, then the 2050 plan is approved. We're approving it with that condition, more or less.
Will it come back here?
No.
No.
Moving it now, then we'll approve.
Any further discussion on that motion to amend? Then all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed, raise your hands. 5-4, motion carries. Back to the motion as amended, further discussion. This is the motion for the approval of the ordinance to adopt the Village of Germantown 2050 Comprehensive Plan with the amendments that we've approved. Any further discussion? Roll call vote.
Trustee Baum,
Aye.
Trustee Pieper,
Aye.
Trustee Hudson,
Aye.
Trustee Kaminsky, Trustee Jan Miller, Trustee Rick Miller,
Aye.
Trustee Myers,
No.
Trustee Nyrider,
Aye.
President Walter.
Aye.
Motion carries.
8-1. That takes care of all items on unfinished business. The next regular village board meeting will be on Monday, October 3rd at 7 PM here at the Village Hall Boardroom, and also accessed via WebEx. Thank you all for coming tonight, and thank you all for watching. We'll see you at the Plan Commission. Have a good night.
I have a headache.
Oh.